Pick up your phone. Go ahead, look at it. That screen, that processor, that battery. Every single component relies on minerals that one country controls, and it's not yours. China processes over 90% of the world's rare earth elements. 90%. The phone in your hand exists because Beijing allows it. That's not an exaggeration. That's a fact that defense departments around the world are losing sleep over right now. These aren't just minerals. They're the backbone of every missile guidance system, every electric vehicle, every wind turbine, and every fighter jet the West depends on. And here's what should terrify you. One export ban changes everything. China has already weaponized this monopoly. They did it in 2010 against Japan. They're doing it again right now. And the West still hasn't built a single alternative. Today, we're going to follow the supply chain that controls your life and expose why nobody in power wants you to understand just how vulnerable you really are. What are rare earths? Before we expose the monopoly, you need to understand what we're actually talking about. Rare earth elements are a group of 17 metallic elements. Names like neodymium, lanthanum, cerium, dysprosium. You've probably never heard of them, but they're in everything. Your smartphone vibrates because of neodymium magnets. Your car's catalytic converter uses cerium. The guidance system on a Tomahawk cruise missile relies on samarium cobalt magnets. Wind turbines. Each one needs about 500 pounds of rare earth magnets to function. Rare earths are to the 21st century what oil was to the 20th. And here's the irony buried in the name. Rare earths aren't actually rare. They exist on every continent. They're scattered across the Earth's crust in reasonable abundance. So if they're not rare, why does one country control virtually all of them? That's where this story gets dark. Because the answer isn't geology, it's strategy. And China's been playing this game for over 40 years, while the rest of the world wasn't even paying attention. Deng's master plan. In 1992, Deng Xiaoping visited southern China and made a statement that most Western analysts completely ignored. He said, quote, "The Middle East has oil, China has rare earths." That wasn't a casual observation. That was a declaration of strategic intent. While the West was celebrating the end of the Cold War and globalizing supply chains in the name of cheap consumer goods, Beijing was quietly cornering one of the most critical resource markets on the planet. China didn't stumble into this monopoly. They engineered it over decades. They invested billions in mining infrastructure. They subsidized production so heavily that no Western mine could compete on price. They offered rare earth processing at rates so low that companies in Australia, the United States, and Canada simply shut down their operations. Why mine it yourself when China sells it cheaper? Cheap today, dependent tomorrow. It seemed like a good deal at the time, but that's how every trap works. If this pattern sounds familiar, it should, because what comes next proves that this wasn't about business. It was about leverage. The Japan crisis. In September 2010, a Chinese fishing trawler collided with two Japanese Coast Guard vessels near the disputed Senkaku Islands. What happened next should have been a wake-up call for the entire Western world. China cut off rare earth exports to Japan, not gradually, not partially, they just stopped. Japan, the world's second largest consumer of rare earths at the time, was suddenly strangled. Factories slowed, production lines froze. Panic spread through Tokyo's industrial sector overnight. Toyota, Sony, Hitachi, companies worth hundreds of billions, were brought to their knees over a fishing boat dispute. If you're starting to see the pattern, that resources equal power and power equals control. Hit like and subscribe to keep exposing what they hide, because what comes next connects all the dots. Prices for some rare earth elements spiked by over 700% in weeks. 700%. Beijing officially denied any export ban existed, calling it a logistics issue. But the message was clear. Defy us, and we turn off the tap. And the world took notes, but did absolutely nothing to change the underlying dependency. That inaction is about to cost the West everything. The processing trap. Now here's where most people get confused. They hear that Australia has rare earth mines, that the US has deposits, that Brazil and India sit on significant reserves, and they think, well, problem solved. Just mine your own. But mining is only step one. The real choke point, the part that gives Beijing its true stranglehold, is processing. You can dig the ore out of the ground anywhere, but turning it into usable material, that's where China owns you. Rare earth processing is one of the most environmentally destructive industrial activities on the planet. It involves toxic acids, radioactive waste, and massive water consumption. Western nations passed environmental regulations that made this processing economically impossible at home. And China said, send it to us. Mine anywhere process, only here. So even when Australia's Linas Corporation mines rare earths, where does a significant portion go for processing? Malaysia, using Chinese-backed technology. Even American rare earth ore from the Mountain Pass mine in California was, until recently, shipped to China for processing. You read that right. Shipped to China, America digs it up and sends it to its strategic competitor to refine. This isn't a supply chain, it's a leash, and the military implications are staggering. The military angle. Let's talk about what keeps Pentagon generals awake at night. Every F-35 Lightning fighter jet requires approximately 920 pounds of rare earth materials. The Aegis combat system on Navy destroyers, rare earths. Precision-guided munitions, satellite communications, night vision goggles. All of them depend on elements that China controls. 1. F-35 fighter jet, 920 pounds of rare earths. 2. Virginia-class submarine, critical rare earth components. 3. Tomahawk missile, samarium cobalt magnets. 4. Predator drone, neodymium motors. A 2021 Department of Defense report quietly admitted that the United States military is, quote, dangerously dependent on a strategic competitor for materials essential to national defense. Dangerously dependent on a strategic competitor for materials essential to national defense. Think about the absurdity of that statement. The most powerful military in human history cannot build its own weapons without materials from the country it considers its greatest threat. As retired General James Mattis warned, the nation that controls rare earth elements controls the future of warfare. And right now, that nation is not the United States. But the military is just one piece of a much larger puzzle that's about to reshape the entire global economy. The green paradox. Here's an irony so thick you could choke on it. The entire Western green energy transition, electric vehicles, wind farms, solar panels, depends entirely on rare earths controlled by China. Every electric vehicle motor needs between 2 and 10 pounds of rare earth magnets. The green revolution cannot happen without Beijing's permission. A single offshore wind turbine requires up to 600 kilograms of neodymium magnets. The European Union has committed to banning internal combustion engines by 2035. The United States is pushing for 50% EV adoption by 2030. Green dreams, Chinese supply. And where will all those rare earths come from? The same country that already weaponized its supply once. The West is essentially trading oil dependency on the Middle East for rare earth dependency on China. Different resource, same vulnerability, same geopolitical trap. Climate activists celebrate every new EV mandate without realizing they're tightening the leash that Beijing holds. It's not that green energy is wrong. It's that the supply chain behind it is a geopolitical time bomb. And nobody running for office wants to admit that inconvenient truth. But this paradox is just the surface of something far more calculated. Africa's sellout. While the West was debating carbon credits and holding climate summits, China was doing something far more strategic. They were buying Africa, not with armies, with checkbooks. Through the Belt and Road Initiative and dozens of bilateral agreements, Chinese state-owned companies have secured mining rights across the Democratic Republic of Congo, Tanzania, Mozambique, and Madagascar. All nations rich in rare earth deposits. When you control the mind, you control the future. The playbook is elegant in its simplicity. Build infrastructure, roads, ports, railways that locals desperately need. In exchange, lock in decades-long exclusive mining agreements. When the host country can't repay the loans, renegotiate for even more favorable extraction terms. Debt trap diplomacy is colonialism with better public relations. The Congo alone holds some of the richest rare earth and cobalt deposits on the planet. Chinese firms now control approximately 70% of Congo's cobalt mining output. That's not partnership. That's ownership with extra steps. Build roads, own mines. And while Western NGOs write concerned reports, Beijing writes mining contracts. The difference between concern and control has never been clearer. But Beijing isn't just securing supply. They're also weaponizing the demand side. Export controls too. In July 2023, China announced new export controls on gallium and germanium, two critical minerals used in semiconductors and fiber optics. In December 2023, they added graphite, essential for EV batteries. Weaponized, this wasn't a response to a fishing boat dispute. This was retaliation for Western semiconductor sanctions and a calculated escalation of resource warfare. The message from Beijing was crystal clear. You restrict our access to advanced chips. We restrict your access to the materials you need to make them. Tit for tat, mineral for microchip, leverage for leverage. In early 2024, China imposed further restrictions on rare earth processing technology, meaning even countries that mine their own rare earths can't easily develop the processing capability without Chinese expertise. China isn't just controlling the minerals. They're controlling the knowledge to process them. They've turned a supply chain into a strategic weapon system, and every new restriction tightens the noose a little more. Western officials call it unfair. Beijing calls it national security. As the legendary strategist Sun Tzu wrote, the supreme art of war is to subdue the enemy without fighting. And that's exactly what's happening, without a single shot fired. But surely the West has a plan to break free, right? The Westerns scramble. After decades of sleepwalking, the West is finally waking up. But is it too late? The United States passed the CHIPS Act and allocated billions toward critical mineral supply chains. The European Union launched its Critical Raw Materials Act. Australia expanded its Elias Corporation operations. Japan invested in deep-sea mining research. Canada opened new mining projects in Quebec and the Northwest Territories. 1. US CHIPS Act and Mineral Stockpiling. 2. AU Critical Raw Materials Act. 3. Australia Elias expansion. 4. Japan Deep-sea mining research. Sounds promising, right? Here's the problem. Building a rare earth mine takes 7 to 15 years from discovery to production. Building processing facilities takes another 5 to 10 years. Training the workforce, developing the expertise, meeting environmental standards. All of this takes time that the West simply may not have. Decades behind, racing forward. China spent 40 years building this monopoly. The West is trying to undo it in 5. And here's the cruel arithmetic. Every new Western mine still sends its ore to China for processing. You can't break a dependency by depending on the same supplier. Until the West builds end-to-end domestic supply chains, from mine to magnet, China holds the cards, and Beijing knows it, which brings us to the question nobody in power wants to answer. Who really wins? So here we are. The West needs rare earths for its military, its green transition, its technology, and its economic future. China controls the supply, the processing, and increasingly the global deposits through African and South American investments. Follow the money, and it all leads back to Beijing. The real question isn't whether China has a rare earth monopoly. The evidence is overwhelming. The real question is what happens when they decide to use it fully. Not against Japan over a fishing boat, not against the West over semiconductor chips, but as a comprehensive strategic weapon in a genuine great power conflict. What happens when the minerals stop flowing entirely? Your phone stops being made. Your electric car stops being built. Your military stops being supplied. That's not a dystopian fantasy. That's a logistics reality that war planners in the Pentagon, NATO, and the European Union are modeling right now. He who controls the spice controls the universe. Replace spice with rare earths, and you have the defining geopolitical reality of the 21st century. The monopoly is real, the vulnerability is real, and the clock is ticking. What you've just heard isn't speculation. It isn't conspiracy theory. It's documented geopolitical reality, verified by defense departments, confirmed by supply chain data, and visible in every export restriction Beijing has imposed. China spent 4 decades building a monopoly that the West is only now beginning to understand. 40 years of strategy. They cornered the mining. They dominated the processing. They locked up African deposits, and they weaponized the supply, all while the West was busy outsourcing its future for cheaper consumer electronics. The lesson here isn't just about minerals. It's about what happens when a civilization stops paying attention to the foundations that hold it up. The greatest threat isn't the one you fight. It's the one you fail to see. Every phone you hold, every electric car that rolls off the line, every missile that protects your borders. All of it exists at the pleasure of a single nation's export policy. That should concern you, not in a panic, but in the way that knowledge should always concern you, as a call to demand better from the people who make decisions on your behalf. If you made it this far, comment Rare Earth Awakened to prove you understand what's really at stake. Every government lies. The question is, what are they lying about? The truth is out there. You just have to follow the supply chain. Like and subscribe to keep digging where they don't want you to look.